There's a story told of a rabbi in ancient times who gathered his students around him early one morning. It was still dark outside. He put the question to them, how can you tell when night has ended and the day has begun? One of the students suggested, could it be when you can see an animal and you can tell whether it is a goat or a sheep? The rabbi shook his head and said, no, that's not it. After a while, another student said, could it be when you look at a tree in the distance, you could tell whether it's a fig tree or a peach tree? Again, the rabbi shook his head and said no. After a few more guests, the student said, well, how would you tell when the night has ended? And the rabbi said to them, it's when you look on the face of another person and you can see them as your brother or sister. If you cannot do this, then no matter what time it is still night. This is a difficult teaching for me right now. I've heard so many lies, conspiracy theories, and hate speech over the past 4 years, and most especially more recently during this election cycle. Maybe the same thing has happened in past election cycles, but it just seems to be impacting me more right now. And I find it increasingly difficult to look upon the faces of some people, and see them as my relative or my sibling or possibly a friend. Heck, some of the people that I am hearing right now, I don't even want to be their acquaintance. I know I am supposed to love my neighbor as myself, even love my enemy. And if someone were to slap me on the cheek, I'm supposed to offer them the other for them to slap me again. I know I'm supposed to listen to all sides in a disagreement effectively if I'm going to resolve any conflict. And I do aspire to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. But I'm just really struggling with some people right now. And I'm wondering how I will listen to some people when this election cycle is over. When I am already sick to death of their voices. How am I going to listen to them? How are you? Are you? On the night after the 2016 election, I remember opening my church to anyone who wanted to come in. I began the time with a chalice lighting, and an explanation of how I would hold the space for people to be able to share their feelings and thoughts. And I could not believe what I heard some people say. They spoke of never being able to talk again to a lifelong friend. They spoke of fractured families. They spoke of bankrupted respect for certain politicians. Well, perhaps that last one about not respecting politicians was not really a surprise, but the passion behind it, the sorrow behind it, was a surprise. In 2016, this became even more personal for me as a couple of people in my own extended family began espousing certain ideas and political affiliations that I just couldn't understand. Even my best friend's mother, whom I'd known since I was in elementary school, was in tears over her eldest son, who had become aggressive toward the rest of the family because they wouldn't believe in his newfound conspiracy theories. And now here we are, 4 years later. I wonder if some of you can relate. I know this country needs to find a way to heal and come back together. But we don't have to agree with each other politically. We need to find a way to listen to one another again. But in my mind and in my heart, I wonder how I will be able to listen to people who are accusing Democrats and movie stars of being pedophiles, holding rallies where they say, "Save the children," even having children say that, when they're doing nothing to actually save the children, and proclaiming that pizza joints are places where pedophiles gather. One QAnon follower declared that pizza is code word for pornography and cheese pizza means child pornography. Perhaps things will settle down once this election is over. Perhaps. But I still wonder how all this rancor and conspiracy theories and bald-faced lying has affected how I listen to others. I ask myself, will I be able to listen to those who have ideas that are so destructive and damaging to certain people and to our country? And today I have to say, I don't know if I can. And yet I know healing for our country will come from listening to those with whom I disagree with. A teacher in the Insight meditation community, Christina Feldman, in her article, Doing, Being, and the Great In-Between, wrote, "The Buddha pointed out that the seeds of liberation, understanding, of clarity, of kindness, of compassion, lie within each of us. And the path to their fruition lies in our commitment to them." Feldman goes on to write, "I would suggest that it is the beautiful and the good that we aspire to. and value above all else. In the midst of the beautiful and the good, we feel most alive, most awake, most present. The Buddhist teachings are about cultivating the beautiful, the good, the seeds of possibility that live in every human heart. The generosity, kindness, and compassion. And these qualities ennoble our hearts and leave no residue of regrets in our minds. I don't want to feel any regret. I want to help cultivate those seeds in everyone's hearts. And yet I wonder if I'm capable right now. I've always believed that listening to one another, deeply listening to one another, and for that matter, listening to what's inside ourselves, is the main way we can achieve our overarching goals of peace, justice, equity, compassion, and interdependence that we as Unitarian Universalists affirm and promote. Maybe I'm a little idealistic about listening to one another. Time, as it so often does, taught me that listening makes a difference. I've had some successes in listening to Republican legislators, evangelicals, conservative union workers. We found common ground on things we could work on together. Issues like getting mentoring for disadvantaged children of color, helping a city rise up from a devastating 500-year flood, and working on marital equality. I've had enough positive outcomes that I'm just not completely ready to put aside my idealism, despite my feelings about right now. And maybe some of you here at UU Miami are also not yet quite ready to cast off your idealism. Think of the work that you've done personally and as a community. Members of UU Miami with various other religious and secular groups closed down the Homestead Temporary Shelter for Unaccompanied Migrant Children. And think of the work some of our UU Miami forebears have done. On January 2nd, 1950, UU Miami members helped form Miami's first integrated nursery school. And to quote UU Miami member Ray Baumel, in our pulpits we have had rabbis, priests, ministers, swamis, Hebrews, blacks, African Americans, Native Americans, Black Panthers, Gray Panthers, gay men. Their voices have been heard here, as well as former presidential candidate Eugene McCarthy, who spoke here in the late 1960s. And historically, even though they've done these things and they've experienced pushback from people in the larger community, when they've done social justice actions, when they've invited speakers in, they've had pushback, like Like there was a cross burned on the lawn of the church at one point. And yet, you Miami members continue to listen to voices of many people and worked with them to achieve significant social justice reform. It just makes sense that you all would have some of the same idealism that I do. We've listened to ourselves, each other, and the voices of those whose thoughts and ideas are different than our own. And we've made a difference. And so today I wonder, as James Thornton does in his article, Radical Confidence, how does one come to a confident and positive view that is not naive, given the state of the world? What he says is by walking through one's anger and despair and emerging into serenity. I have to say, I don't want to be a naive idealist, but I am willing. I am willing to be an informed idealist. I want to face my feelings of anger and despair, and not get stuck in them. To find serenity and let those feelings of anger and despair springboard me into hope toward making a positive difference, even with the divisiveness in our country. I admit, there are voices I don't think I can listen to right now. Voices that try to convince me of conspiracy theories, whose voices are flat out lying. Well, my friends, there are many other voices I can listen to that are different than my own. And I think I can listen to them with empathy and compassion. Recently, I took a class. It was called the Compassionate Warrior Boot Camp for White Allies, the Unitarian Universalist version, with David Camp and Unitarian Universalist religious educator Allison Mahaley. They have an idealistic vision of teaching white allies to speak to other white people about racism. In so doing, they hope to change the minds and hearts of 10% of the white people in this country and convince them to start talking about the issues of racism. Not 100%, 10%. They taught me a way of talking to others who have ideas that are different than my own. They called it the RACE method. RACE is an acronym for reflect, ask, connect, and expand. This method encourages the use of curiosity, compassion, and empathy in discussions about difficult issues. Reflect has to do with considering your own feelings and issues before having a conversation. In other words, preparing yourself for a difficult conversation. Ask has to do with actually reaching out and being willing to ask the thoughts and feelings of another person, someone with whom you have some difference with. And then connect is sharing some of your own feelings and thoughts that are similar to that person that you're talking to, not to affirm that you agree with all of their thinking, but to express empathy for what they are thinking and feeling. And then you can expand. Expand the conversation to go deeper into issues and feelings with that person. This expand step might occur over many conversations, but having done the groundwork, reflect, ask, and connect, you'll be showing them that you will listen to their thoughts and feelings and not reject them out of hand. Building trust for future conversations. If you're interested in learning more about this, we can talk. Let me know. But I wanted to share this brief overview of this method because I believe, as Unitarian Universalist idealists as we are being called to reach out to people in our country, to begin a dialogue to heal the rift that exists in the fabric of our nation. I know this may be a lofty goal. Perhaps I should say, like Camp and Allison do, that we do 10% of the nation. But we need to do some piece. I know this is a lofty goal. But haven't we at one time or another tried to achieve something that felt enormous or even impossible? I do believe there are people out there who will be ready to listen after this election. People who we do not ordinarily talk to. After this election has passed, I am committed to initiating these conversations with people on the other side of the political and religious spectrum from me. You see, I haven't lost my belief that we, all human beings, have some common feelings, some values that we share, some desire for positive change and connection with one another. I believe in the power of conversation. Still, even after all this, that those conversations can still make change happen and connect us with one another. Heck, just last Wednesday, I, along with Terry Lohman and other Unitarian Universalists, talked to Florida Senator Marco Rubio's staff about environmental justice. In that conversation, we came to some common ground and identified some things that Rubio's staff felt that Rubio would be willing to work on. A conversation. I have, as many of you probably have, concerns about the future of our country, about the healing of our country. But I still am holding hope. Idealistic, irrational, or otherwise. I still am holding hope for our country. And I invite you to search within yourselves for that hope as well. Because deep down in you, it's still there. And because there is much work to be done. We don't have to listen to everyone. But I believe we have to listen to more than one or two people who are different than us if healing is going to happen. Helen Keller may or may not have said the following, but it's still very powerful, and it strengthens me as I face this post-election time, and perhaps it will give you some strength, empower you to do some of the work ahead. This quote goes, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything,